Yes, thank you so much. Um, so I was a visiting student at Northeastern University in Boston. So part of what I'm presenting today also comes from that project and that time there. Um, so my presentation today will be focused on firms, pharmaceutical firms in multisectoral partnerships, grand challenges and sustainability in the pharmaceutical market. So I will first go through what are multisectoral partnerships. It's a mouthful. Why do we care? And then I will go through a little bit what are the main research problems that I'm exploring in my thesis. And then I will focus on two studies and then draw some overall conclusions. So um, first of all, we start from the antibiotic pipeline and the challenges involved in that. We are all familiar with the spreading of antibiotic resistance bacteria. And from a business perspective or an economic perspective, this causes a lot of troubles. So we know that the research and development processes in this field are very complex and expensive. Not many companies are active anymore because the expected profitability is very low. And so there is a general lack of innovation in this field. This also means that production and manufacturing of antibiotics is more and more complex. We want lower volumes for stewardship. There are complex supply chains, so all of this causes problems to businesses. And also, when it comes to market distribution, we have issues with pricing and accessibility and so on. So overall, we have a lot of problems, so we call this a grand challenge. And the actors in this field, they're not just larger pharma companies, we also have smaller companies. Of course, we have public authorities and healthcare providers, and then we have researchers, academia, and other actors. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to collaborate to support somehow the research and development of new antibiotics, but also in general market innovation. And so their collaboration leads to these partnerships being created basically in different ways and for different purposes. And here is, there are not very many partnerships that do antibiotic, that handle antibiotic resistance all over the world. So here is a bunch of them, and they operate in different stages of the antibiotic pipeline. And just to give you a brief overview or an example, we have Carbex that is based in Boston, was founded in 2016. There are several partners that joined Carbex. And as you can see here from the list, they're both academic, international agencies or institutions, foundations, and then we also have a lot of pharmaceutical companies participating. And the main activity that Carbex does is to select and finance R&D projects and then lead them through some stages of development. On the other side, we have another example, which is Platinia. This is a Swedish partnership founded in 2017. We also have different partners from different sectors. So we have healthcare providers, academic and research institutions, and again, we have pharmaceutical companies. And Platinia is more focused on the production and distribution of antibiotics. So they have different multidisciplinary working groups that work on public health, so monitoring the shortages in the Swedish market, identifying knowledge gaps. They work on marketing, so they are analyzing the supply chains and the reimbursement models and pricing for antibiotics. And they also work on the clinical side to improve the use of antibiotics. So this is just to show that different partnerships of these organizations that I call multisectoral partnerships, they do different things depending on where they are at, but they're all made of this very variety of partners, basically, with very ambitious goals. So the research problem that we're dealing with here is we have these actors that are cooperating for a common benefit, but they have different goals and nature, so they are not used to working together. They don't have the same purpose as organizations. So they have different ways of working, different logics. So the first problem that I'm exploring is how should this cooperation be managed? How can these actors cooperate together? On the other side, all these actors come with very different knowledge bases. So they have different expertise, specialties, skills, capabilities, and so on. And so if they are cooperating somehow, they need to collaborate and share these knowledge bases and put together their different specializations. So here, more questions come on how this knowledge sharing can be supported because of these different backgrounds and languages that they speak. And also, what are the outcomes of this cooperation? So when they share their knowledge and they work together, what are the outcomes? Is this something good or good enough, in a sense? So these are in general the problems that I'm trying to look at in my thesis. And now we can dive in one of the studies that are part of my thesis. This study is based on simulations, and I've done it in collaboration with some co-authors, so Simone Callegari, Enrico Baraldi, Francesco Ciabuschi, and Olof Lindahl. We've worked together on this. So in this study, we focus on partnerships for research and development, so that work in this side of the pipeline. So this type of partnerships are kind of tackling the problem of the lack of innovation in antibiotics. And the way they work is that, so we have these actors from different sectors and countries, and these actors join forces to do two different things. So some actors end up in executive committees and advisory boards in this partnership. And other actors come up with ideas. So they have teams that apply for funding at this partnership. So they have molecules that are candidates for different phases of R&D. So what happens is that there is a project selection, and then these executive committees, they are not just selecting the projects, but they also want to support the projects throughout the phases, the R&D phases, so to support the R&D process. So here the question is, how do they do that? Because as we see here, we have people coming from different actors, so they're not used to working together. They have very different ways of working, different interests. How should they work together? How can they support these R&D projects, basically? And so the model we build on is based on this idea that each R&D project has an expected duration. So time that it takes for the different tests to be run and things to be explored. It has some costs, of course, to be run, and has a probability of success or of failure. And these features together determine two types of termination rates. So on the one side, we have financial termination. So we have to measure the profitability or the expected profitability of these R&D projects. And then if this is too low, they might be terminated. And on the other side, we have the technical termination. So basically the survival rate from a scientific perspective of the project itself. Based on these rates, then these projects might or might not arrive to market launch, and so might generate innovation. And so the idea is what we were saying, how can we support these selected R&D projects within multisectoral partnerships? And there are two ways to support these projects. So one tool is control, and one tool is knowledge sharing. So what we mean by this is that control implies setting milestones, setting meetings for these teams to come together, setting deadlines, and asking these teams to provide reports and so on. So providing some controls throughout the work of these teams. On the other side, we can also ask these teams to do knowledge sharing, meaning that they are kind of forced to share their knowledge bases with others. For example, it could be external experts that come in and support these teams. It can be that the different teams talk to each other and support each other. They are learning throughout. The partnership itself is learning throughout its work and then can support the teams in different ways. So what we did in our project, basically, we did interviews with people participating in this environment, and we tried to gather information about these activities, so how they were supported. And then we put numbers into this model, and then we simulated it to see basically how did this look like and what outcomes it leads to. And what we found basically is that you can have different degrees of control and knowledge sharing. So different degrees of this support can be implemented. And the idea is that these have a different impact on the innovation performance of the partnerships itself. So overall, putting together all the R&D projects. And in a sense, there is a sweet spot in the degree of control. So we don't want to be too overbearing on the project, so controlling too much. And we also don't want to let the project loose without any type of control, because then it wouldn't be useful to be together in a partnership. So the idea is to find a medium degree of control. This would maximize the innovation performance. On the other side, we have knowledge sharing. So this bringing together the knowledge from external sources to these R&D teams. And here it's different because we find that there is so much specialty involved, so much complexity involved, and so on, that there is no limit to the benefits of bringing in new knowledge to these teams. So there is this more increasing relationship with decreasing marginal returns, basically, between knowledge sharing and the innovation outcome. And so by crossing these 6 variations in degrees, we came up with 6 different scenarios, and we attached values to those scenarios, and to create a simulation, to make the simulation. And basically, here are the results of our simulation. So basically, we see if we measure or if we simulate the number of antibiotics that come out and arrive to market launch, we see that a medium degree of control, as we were saying, is quite good compared to the baseline. So to a situation where there is no support provided from the partnership itself. And then when we combine the two, the knowledge sharing and the control, this is the one that brings the most expected benefits on the market. So basically, this is the result of our simulation, that this would be the best way to support a project with medium control and high knowledge sharing. So now moving on to the second study on corporate social responsibility. This project is still ongoing. It's the one that I started last semester. So, and my co-authors are Alice Schmuck and Alvaro Cuervo Cazzurra. So here we need to take a step back and change a little bit the perspective on this. So we are looking at these same partnerships from the perspective of the larger pharmaceutical companies involved. And so we are asking, given the fact that we know that they are abandoning the R&D of antibiotics, we ask, what do they get? What do these companies get out of joining the partnership? So why would they be joining these partnerships? And so we connect this to the concept of the purpose of business companies. So in general, we know companies want to make profit. This is their purpose. But there is a theory that is called corporate social responsibility that says basically that there are 2 other areas of action of companies, that is the society and the environment. And these are equally important and relevant. So basically, this appeals or calls to the social responsibilities of businessmen, of people working in companies. And the idea is that companies can contribute to sustainability, so sustainable economic development, and to the well-being of the individuals that work with them, and also to the well-being of society at large. So they can be involved in these larger societal problems. And for example, a good list of these problems or challenges that are affecting societies is the United Nations SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals. So the idea is that companies' performance can be measured just based on the financial side, so on their profit, but can also be measured on their social performance, so their social responsibility. And this is something that is more and more common and more important for investors to consider. So this was a big introduction to now how this comes into place for this study and for antibiotic resistance. And so basically the idea is that in order to improve their social CSR performance, companies might join multisectoral partnerships. And why is that? It's because of stakeholder theory. So because by being close to their stakeholders, they might learn more and be able to have a better social responsibility towards their surroundings, but also because they, again, this knowledge sharing comes in. So because if they collaborate with other actors, they know more, for example, about what is necessary in their local communities, what are the big issues ongoing, and they get a better understanding of what they can do to contribute and to support these issues. And so basically our hypothesis for this paper is that pharma companies want to join these partnerships in order to improve their social CSR performance. So in order to explore this and to measure this, we collected data on 180 US-based pharmaceutical companies, and it was a longitudinal, so it's a longitudinal study, so we collected 10 years of data. And we looked at their social CSR performance, which is measured in a standard way with a standard index. And then we collected their reports where they are presenting and describing their CSR activity. And we hand-coded these reports in order to really understand what type of initiatives they were doing in this area. And as I said, this is work in progress, so we're now moving on to collect data on European-based companies. And here is just a list of which data we were collecting. So we were trying to understand what type of activities they did in their corporate social responsibility area. So, for example, activities could be supporting access to care, advocacy, capacity building, digitalization, drug availability, R&D, education, and funding. So you see that in this study, R&D partnerships are just one type, or R&D activities are just one type of many other types of activities. We were trying to map the different targets of these initiatives and then the type of partners, because some companies can be active socially just on their own or collaborating with other companies or collaborating with other types of actors like NGOs, school or universities, public institutions, but also in multisectoral partnerships. So this is one of the ways in which they can do this. And then we ran a statistical analysis on this unbalanced panel data to measure basically these effects that we were looking at. And this is an example of another multisectoral partnership that was we included in this study. So this is a bit of a broader studies, not just focusing on activities for antibiotic resistance, but including other challenges, as I said. So, for example, these big partnerships is called DNDi, and they are developing and distributing drugs for neglected diseases. So it's a bit broader scope, but related to this. So here is from a bit more technical perspective, our model. So we are testing whether the participation in multisectoral partnerships has any effect on the social CSR performance of companies, and also if a larger variety in the targets of these initiatives, in the activities that they're doing and in the geographical location has any impact on this performance. And we have preliminary results for now, because as I said, we are still expanding the sample. But what we saw is that there is definitely a positive a relationship between the variety in the partner and the social CSR performance. And this basically connects back to what I was saying about the possibility of collaborating with other actors and learning from them and putting together the knowledge bases. This improves basically the outcome of these types of initiatives that companies are doing. And also, preliminarily, this is the way the relationship between the number of multisectoral partnerships and the performance looks like. So it's a little bit of a bell shape. So there might be here a tipping point. So it might be that too many of these partnerships create too much complexity to handle. And so that companies should aim for a limited number of partnerships, basically to maximize their performance again. So now we can get to some conclusions jointly from these studies. So the first one is that at the general level, in order to face antibiotic resistance and other challenges, we need cooperation between companies and other actors. And that this cooperation, being across sector, is very difficult to handle. Knowledge sharing is a key dimension of this cooperation. It has the potential to improve innovation on the market, and it supports companies in their social responsibility efforts. And so thanks to this knowledge sharing and this cooperation, we can be more effective in tackling antibiotic resistance and other challenges. So with this, I would like to thank you all for listening, and I can take questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you so much. Very nice to see the advancement and the additions of new projects to your PhD. It's really cool. You're getting some hearts here and applauses as well.
Thanks.
So let's see if anybody has any questions, but I do, meanwhile, have some questions, like always. I have some questions on the first project, which I don't know if I fully understood. How do you measure the degree of control? Because that could, like the only thing that I can think of a parallel, it's, for example, I don't know, a PhD student and the supervisor relationship, right? Like there is the control really needed to be an optimal level will depend really on the relationship in itself and the student and the supervisor. And you don't want to be micromanaged, but you don't want to be left alone either. So how did you work with that?
Yeah, so you're right. It's very difficult to basically create general laws about this. So what we did is, based on these interviews, we kind of listed all the possible activities that you can do, because even if there's no like general rule about this, there are a certain amount of activities and things that you can do in this specific context of R&D. For antibiotics. So basically, we listed all of these activities, and then we were working with our interviewees and we were asking, so what would you think is the consequence in terms of duration, cost, and probability of success of this smaller set of control tools or of this larger set of control tools? And then basically with control, what you see is that more control can in a sense, decrease the duration of the project because you have like stricter deadlines, but it might also increase the costs because then you're kind of forced to do some specific tests or some specific reports and other things that you might not have done otherwise. And so, yeah, in this sense, we were trying to map it. And so we didn't come up with kind of a measurement scale or something very quantitative and strict, but just with these degrees that are kind of buckets of different control tools.
Very, very interesting. I understand a little bit more. Like obviously it's a very subjective thing, right? But you try to objectify as much as possible with it, given the and then on your second project, I was thinking really cool to see this like social responsibility, especially if you think about antibiotic area, because I know that you are doing your study even at a bigger perspective. So you're not only focusing on pharma companies that do antibiotics, but it's your findings are going to be applicable at a much broader scale and many other potential societal problems. But it's very interesting because antibiotics need so much of these other things that it's not just new antibiotics into the market, so on and so forth. So there I was actually thinking a couple of things. One is if you have thought to maybe include things that are specific for antibiotics within the different sections that you're looking into. You told me that different, either the type or the, what was it you had? Yeah, this
Here.
activity type and target. Some
Mhm.
of them are in particularly thought to be applicable to antibiotics in particular.
Yeah.
Which ones are you looking into that would be?
So yeah, I mean, um, I mean, we are collecting data so that we can
Mm-hmm.
also look into antibiotics in particular. But the problem with this type of study is that we need big numbers, and
Mm.
in order to test this with some kind of statistical significance basically. So and we started from 10 years ago, but not many companies have published their reports 10 years ago. So because this is kind of a trend now, and companies are more, and in a sense it's very good because companies are aware that they are watched, and consumers and patients are looking at what is their stance on social problems. So now they are publishing more and more reports, and so then we find more information, and we can build this larger sample. But yeah, if we just looked at antibiotics, we wouldn't have enough. Yeah,
Yeah,
data.
I completely understand that. It's the same thing as, when you're trying to make a new antibiotic only for resistant infections, you really don't have enough patients to make any assumptions about the drug, right? Like that's the difficulty of it. But I was thinking, I don't know, like maybe down the line, when you have all your data and looking at you could include things like specific communications on the resistance issue that they are involved in, or I mean, the initiative target could be, I don't know, a cancer company that thinks are talking about resistance when they are talking about their things like this that maybe
Yeah,
can paint a brush specifically on antibiotics if you are interested in that. Uh,
yeah.
Hafiz, do you have a question? Yeah, please, you can open up your mic and tell Carla.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eva. And thank you so much, Carla, as well. Fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I did have questions specific to both studies, but I'll start with the first study in this case first. Very interesting insights. And I really loved how we ended up with the scenario of having the optimal outcome as having medium control as well as high knowledge sharing. But I wanted to ask you, with regards to the simulation study that you did, I know that you also did interviews. So and I know those were numbers and we saw that in graphs, but in your interviews, did you maybe ask them that about this particular insight, that having that medium control and high level sharing, is that the optimal, is that helping them with their innovation, reaching those levels of innovation that was depicted in the graph? I just wanted to make sure those insights collected qualitatively are also matching with the quantitative data. That's the first question. And then the second one is actually linked to a little bit of what Eva was saying in terms of control, but and I wanted to specify in the context of multisectoral partnerships. As we know, not all multisectoral partnerships are sort of supporting, giving that support or having that control from the first step until the last step, right? So there are some, for example, partnerships that support maybe phase one. And I really love the fact that you started with the antibiotic pipeline, showing us all the phases that are there. And so some partnerships do that support in a particular phase, and another one maybe to the later phase. Some ones are in the middle. So that control aspect as well, I just wanted to confirm if the results that we said, that medium control and high knowledge sharing, it's applicable to that specific support, that or that specific duration in which they're offering the support, or it's applicable to the whole process of the pipeline that you showed us. I don't know if that question
Yeah,
made sense. So I'll
yeah,
start with that before I
absolutely.
go to something.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for for your questions. I think they're spot on. And so, yeah, in my presentation, I was very quick on the methods, but here there's a little bit of a deep dive into the methods that we used. So we start from these baseline data. So we start from data from this come out of reports on this industry, where basically we are putting in range values for each R&D phase, and we are actually only looking at preclinical phase 1 and phase 2. So we have the average for durations, cost, and probability of success, and then also revenues and discount rate in these phases. And these we are taking in this way, and then there are already ranges. So of course there is already a variation within each. But then what we do is that in our 6 scenarios, based on the interviews that we did, we are kind of changing these ranges. So we're kind of moving the average or the ranges up and down based on the impact that is suggested by our interviewees. And in this way, the simulation runs with 50,000 rounds, so with many hypothetical projects, and moves this formula to compute the expected net present value in the baseline in these different 3 phases, and also in each of these scenarios in these 3 phases. And then, so it's a quite complex process. And then in the end, you have this average expected number of antibiotics that are coming out. So these numbers, of course, are simulated numbers, but the whole idea is to try to simulate some concrete outcomes, some concrete numbers for different types of partnerships, because the idea is these partnerships are quite expensive, and we want to manage them in a way that is really supporting the innovation potential that they have. So I hope this answers a little bit.
Yeah, spot on. Thank you so much, Carla. That is really helpful. And then moving on to study 2, really, I was very curious about the results for the first part that you showed. I remember you showed the results, and especially for the first one. Yes, the first graph that you showed here. You know, and maybe this might be a little bit out of scope, but I just wanted to confirm as well. You know, clearly we can see that when you have a higher variety of partners, you know, the social CSR performance clearly is, you know, much better. But there are, of course, some factors or some instances where we see that when the partners are low or the variety is low, there's also a low sort of performance. And maybe this might be a little bit just jumping the gun or jumping the topic, but I was curious, in your perspective, what do you think that could be leading the fact that, or sometimes, for example, when you have a higher variety as you see, but then you still see a low social CSR performance, and then in other cases you see a much higher CSR performance, considering the variety is the same. I just wanted to know your perspectives on that. Interesting. And lastly, just on the same results. I know you said you're collecting the data still, but I was really curious to find out as well if you did find any preliminary results for your geographical location, because I think that's so interesting.
Yeah. So no, regarding the second question, unfortunately, no, we still don't have any preliminary results. But I agree, this could be very interesting. Also to see if there is a difference in behavior between US-based and Europe-based, and also companies based in other countries, for sure. So so I would say the problem here is that we have many confounding factors. So it's not just these 3 varieties that are impacting this social CSR performance, but it's also company size, how many products they have, how spread their, for example, production and distribution are, and so on. So clearly there is no one-to-one effect. So it's not just one factor impacting the social CSR performance. It's a very complex environment and phenomenon. And so this is why this is still preliminary, because we are really trying to measure different things and identify the factors that are at least having a significant impact. But yeah, I mean, the size of the companies is something that it has a very large impact. So if you see here, there are zero variety. So basically, companies that just act on their own, and some of them still have good social performance. So basically, there's still a lot that we don't know, and we're trying to understand about these relationships.
Thank you so much, Carla. That was really helpful and amazing, really amazing. I don't know if you could drop your email in the chat so I could be in touch with you later
Yeah,
on if you have anything.
sure.
And thank you so much for the great work. Really enjoyed it and fantastic.
I can only agree. Well, it's really, really nice. Actually, regarding to this, on the next one, I only have a clarifying question because it wasn't super clear to me if what the variation is actually a given company in how many different multisectorial partnerships is involved, or the number of partners within one multisectorial partnership. It's what you're
No,
looking
it's
here.
the first one. So
Okay.
one company joining different numbers of partnerships.
That actually completely
Yeah,
makes
because
sense.
the idea is that if you have too many, then you have a lot of relationships to handle. So
Yeah, too many
yeah,
things to do, obviously. And
yeah.
just one last question that I have that it came up to me now when you were discussing with who asked you, Hafiz asked you the question related to your simulation and then the number of output antibiotics depending on the degree of control and knowledge sharing. Maybe still too early, but do you see that maybe at some point in the future one could actually do the cross validation, which is look at the number of outputs that a particular partnership had, and then infer the degree of control and knowledge sharing that that partnership was involved in?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the problem and the reason why we're doing simulations is that because we don't have enough real data on this. But we like policymakers are really interested in knowing where they should put their money. So this is why simulations come in very handy in this case. But definitely, I would say maybe in a few years, we could collect data the other way around. So the output and then see how that was achieved. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really, really cool. Very nice. Great. Carla, thank you so much. I think we're gonna be closing off our webinar for today, so we keep up to the 2 o'clock maximum time that we have. But it was great to see the progress and all the work that you did also at Northeastern.
Northeastern.
Yes, university. And really interesting data that I think it would be applicable to a lot of the things that are going on, especially in the antibiotics area. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you, Philip, for your talk as well. And thank you all of you that attended, that stayed until the end, and for your questions and reflections. Thank you, and see you at the next webinar in the beginning of April.
Thank
Bye,
you so
guys.
much.